I used to work as a security guard at the mall a few miles away from my house. I'm going to tell you about the case that made me quit. More than anything else, I want you all to help me with something. I want you to tell me what I should do. I'll explain the story and ask a more in-depth question at the end. So, there was one night where I wasn't working and I was enjoying my night off. Nothing bad or weird happened to me that night. When I went into work the next day, I found out that a man had been found dead in the downstairs Old Navy. I learned his name, but out of respect, I'll call him Jake. The workers obviously horrified when they opened up the shop doors in the morning and found a man's body laying in the middle of the store floor. They had to close the store for the entire day so no customers would find out. The strange part was that there was absolutely no evidence showing what exactly happened to him. Almost everything in the store seemed untouched, and there was nothing around him to indicate a possible weapon. They asked me to look through the security cameras to see what happened to him. I agreed. Big mistake. I opened up the security footage for Old Navy and rewinded all the way back to the previous night at about 8 p.m. I didn't see anything for a while, but I sat and waited until I saw the man enter. At about 8:40, Jake walked in. There were only a few people left in there because the mall would close in 20 minutes. The store manager saw Jake and told him this fact. Jake agreed and said that he just had to go to the bathroom. He clumsily waddled into the men's room, nervously clutching the area between his pants. He found his way to a stall and leaned against the side of it. I fast-forwarded the camera and looked away as he did his business. I looked back hesitantly after a bit and saw that he was passed out in the stall. I rewinded a few seconds and saw that while he was leaning against the stall wall, it seemed like he was relying on it for support. He must have zoned out or fallen asleep standing up or something, because he fell down and smacked his head on the cement wall on the way down. He knocked himself out cold. I fast-forwarded to the part where he woke up. I was a little angry that the store maintenance didn't come in and check the bathrooms before closing, but I wasn't surprised. The cleaning staff in the mall has always been notoriously lazy and never doing their jobs well. When Jake woke up, I stopped fast-forwarding and let the video play. At this point, it was about 9:20. He probably realized that he had been passed out for a while, so he scrambled to his feet. He gently rubbed the tender spot on his head where he hit the wall. It was quickly growing into a nasty, rugged bruise. Jake yanked open the bathroom door handle and ran into the main section of the store. Except, he only took a few steps in before he quickly halted himself. The store, as well as the entire rest of the mall, was closed. This meant that all the lights were off and all the doors were closed and locked. Jake could only see darkness, nothing else. He was locked in. When the room is pitch black for more than a minute or two, the cameras automatically switch to night vision mode, so I continue watching with ease. Jake did not have this luxury, so he started feeling around the walls and squinting through the darkness to try and find some sort of light switch or flashlight he could use. There was suddenly the sound of a loud rustle and what sounded like something moving. The cameras are not very good at picking up sound, and even I heard it. Jake panicked slightly, but he tried, not very well, but to remain cool. He began to frantically feel along the walls to find anything that could help. He eventually felt something slightly sticking out of the wall. He didn't think twice before flicking it up. Thank God it was a light switch, though. Most of the lights in the store's main section turned on and gave Jake sight again. The night vision camera nearly blinded me for a moment before deactivating and switching back to regular camera settings. He looked around the store, probably looking to see if there was any sort of person or animal sneaking around, but there was no one. Jake began walking around the store, surveying his surroundings. There were several large metal gates sealing all the front entrances shut. He looked around for any possible way out, but everywhere he looked, he just saw clothing. There were shelves everywhere, absolutely filled with clothes. They were covering every single mannequin. Then, he saw all the mannequins. I never liked those goddamn mannequins. There must have been at least 20 of them. They looked like they were everywhere with the bodies positioned in every which way, looking in every direction with their lifeless faces and plastic bodies and accessories. They were enough to give you the chills if you were too scared. I've always wondered why stores even started using them in the first place. Then suddenly, a huge crash of thunder scared Jake half to death. It was storming outside that night. Bad. There was a terrible thunderstorm for a few hours. I knew the store would probably lose power at any moment. He knew this too, so that gave him even more motivation to start finding a way out. He started walking over to the other end of the store, looking for any other exits. But on his way over, just as I predicted, all the lights in the store went out. They came back on again after a few seconds, but in that brief moment of pitch black darkness, I could barely hear something move again. That meant that Jake definitely heard it too. I could tell he was trying to brush it off as something else, but what bothered me was the fact that the cameras never turned off. If the power went off, the cameras would be diable and would need to be rebooted, but they stayed fully functional. I didn't understand. Jake walked all the way to the back of the store, but found a bunch of small offices. No exits. As he turned back around to go to the main section of the store, the lights flickered off and on again. This time, they stayed off for slightly longer. I was hoping that any movement the night vision would switch on so I could see what was happening. But the lights came on again, soon. The cameras stayed on yet again. This time, the store was different. Jake walked back into the store's main section and stopped for a moment. He looked at all the mannequins in front of him. He could swear that at least 5 of them were turned towards him, and at least 2 of them were looking him dead in the eyes. I'm positive that they were, not in those positions before, but he tried to pay no mind to them. He walked towards the main help desk and started looking through drawers. I could assume he was looking for some sort of keyring or something else to break out with. The lights went out again, but they came back up after only about 5 seconds. Jake looked back out towards the store. He looked at the mannequins. Almost all of them were looking at him or facing him in some way. Their deadpanned, lifeless faces pierced Jake's soul. I could sense this, and I was just watching it in complete safety. Some of the mannequins had clearly moved a substantial amount. Some of their arms were in completely different positions, and their bodies were beginning to shape in a way that only a human could. A few of them had completely moved off the panels they were initially displayed on, and they seemed to be moving towards Jake. He began to breathe very quickly and nervously. He backed away from the desk and ran back down towards the narrow bathroom hallway. He probably thought it was a safer place. He forcibly pushed on the door, but it didn't budge. He tried pushing it again, but it didn't open. Poor Jake. He didn't realize that the workers always locked all the doors in the workplace before leaving. He was able to leave the bathroom, but he couldn't get back in. He pounded the door hard with his fists. Then, almost as if on cue, it got pitch black again. The lights turned off for what seemed like an eternity. I most definitely heard many footsteps moving around the store. I prayed that Jake was moving around them and was escaping the store at this very moment. The light came back on. The cameras were still on, and Jake stood in the same spot he was when the lights went out. We were both terribly startled when we saw a large group of mannequins crowding the hallway directly in front of him. There were at least 10 of them that were reaching out towards him like a bunch of zombies, but their faces still remained fixed in their default smile. Jake quickly looked for space in the hallway. The mannequins were crowding him, and if he didn't move out of there right now, the mannequins would corner him and do something to him. The only way to avoid them was by going back down that hallway and scooting out of the way of all the mannequins. In order to do that, Jake would have to hinge past each and every one while praying to heaven that the lights didn't go out while he was there. So that's just what he did. He quickly and carefully maneuvered his way around the huge pack of plastic people, and with everyone he passed, I would pray as hard as he could that the lights would stay on. It's odd. I hadn't really felt this sort of feeling before, and I've never felt it since then. It was a sense of hoping and praying that he would get by each mannequin, even though I knew exactly how this whole situation would end. I can only describe it as a hopeful dread. I guess the best I can compare it to is when you're watching a movie where a character makes a big mistake. Then the next time you watch it, you pray that the character makes a different decision, even though you already know what happens and what the outcome is. Sorry, I'm rambling. He eventually got out of the hallway without a scratch on him. He quickly ran to the opposite side of the store and away from the horde of death. Now, he could begin to catch his breath. He looked towards the bathroom hallway and saw the backs of all the mannequins. They were all still facing that one spot on the bathroom door where he once stood. At this point, we both knew that the mannequins only moved when the lights turned off. So long as the lights stay on, he would be safe. I shouldn't have been thinking that, because the moment the thought entered my head, the darkness surrounded the screen once more. This time, it stayed off for longer than before. I counted down from 2 minutes and waited until the night vision mode kicked in, but it never got there. I initially thought that he should move and find somewhere else safe, but that would have been stupid. The mannequins knew where he was no matter what, and even if they didn't, Jake would most likely trip and fall over something which would get himself killed even faster. Then suddenly, I just listened for a moment. I heard the static noise of the camera, but I couldn't hear the storm anymore. As I heard the vicious thunder that poured down on the mall's roof, but I couldn't hear anything anymore. That didn't make any sense. If the storm was gone, then how was the power still out? How were the lights still flickering? Why were the cameras still in perfect working order? Then, the lights came back on. Jake was back against the wall. Every single mannequin in the store was about half a foot away from Jake's face. All of their arms and legs were extended out to him, and all of their dead eyes were staring into his soul. When the lights turned off again, every single mannequin would do something ungodly to Jake. Well, all except one. Jake wasn't able to move out of his position, but he was able to see out into the store, and he saw one lone mannequin who was far separated from the others. I could clearly see this mannequin too. This one was a woman with a great big smile, short blonde hair, and a red handbag. She was in a corner that was a little hard to see from the cameras, so I could have easily missed her if I wasn't looking for her. She was standing against the wall on the opposite side of the store as Jake. She had her arm outstretched towards the wall, and her finger was getting ready to touch something. But I couldn't see what it was at first. I shifted to another camera on the other wall and zoomed in. I saw what she was about to touch. Her finger was hovering directly over the light switch. The storm wasn't making the lights flicker on and off. It was the mannequins. He was at their mercy in that moment. He looked back at that woman's face. She wasn't looking at that light switch. She was looking directly at Jake with her great big smile, just like all the others. His stress and anxiety must have been unimaginable. Nothing could ever compare to being deathly stared down by a bunch of oversized dolls. He tried shouting and telling the mannequin no, but he knew it wouldn't do any good. It's a damn mannequin. Eventually, Jake gave up on pleading. He looked back at the mannequin's finger and waited. The last thing we saw was the small plastic finger move down ever so slightly. Then darkness enveloped the screen. Darkness, and nothing else. I heard screaming and lots of movement from the screen. I desperately wanted to know what was happening, but also never ever wanted to know what fate he was suffering in that moment. I heard silence after a while. This time, the night vision mode did not turn on. And when it did, I saw the store just as it looked this morning. I still to this day do not know what happened to that man. And at this point, I don't ever want to know. I need you guys to tell me what to do now. After a few more moments of watching the motionless store, I pressed stopped, and I did my best to destroy all the surveillance footage from that night. I couldn't let anyone know. I walked out and told them all that the store cut off the power to the camera, and that it didn't record anything major. I quit right after that. Should I go back and tell the truth? I do feel bad, leaving that store with those monsters still inside. There's only one big reason I don't want to go back and tell them all about what happened. One small feature bothered me about the end of the surveillance video. When Jake's body laid lifeless on the floor, and the mannequins returned to their regular store poses, one mannequin was still off. The female one that had turned off the light switch for the final time. She was striking her appropriate pose, but she was staring directly into the camera. Directly at me. She knew I was there. She knew I was watching. Now, she's watching me.